Okay, so this is the second time I'm talking about this topic. It's a topic that put together my interest on infants and consciousness, but also some interest on some important issues regarding the development of mind and some connections with some more current topic related to consciousness and AI. Okay. So what I'm planning to speak today is starting with how or when phenomenology emerges, and I'm calling this phenomenologenesis. So what is the first, when we have our first experience, our first phenomenological experience? So I'm interested in the foundation of what I'm calling phenomenologenesis. I will say a little bit more about this concept in a moment, but for this talk, I will focus in one specific kind of phenomenologenesis that I'm calling sentioception, okay? So the question is whether infants can perceive others as conscious creatures and whether there is a specific phenomenology of perceiving others as conscious subjects, okay? So I propose some three-level developmental framework to think about how perceiving others as conscious develops. I'll present some empirical evidence. I will address some methodological challenges, and I'll try to reply to some skeptical challenges. And then I will connect this topic to two other discussions in the vicinity. One, whether our intuition that there is some our intuition regarding a dualistic picture of the mind and body, whether there is any connections between perceiving others as conscious and this intuitive dualistic view that bodies and minds are separated, okay? And I will connect this discussion with two theoretical accounts by Andrew Metzoff and Peacock. In the future version of this paper, I will connect with Liz Spelk's view, but for this talk, I will focus on Metzoff and Peacock. And I will end with a connection between the perception, the infant perceptions of others as conscious, to our interactions between human and AI, okay? That means whether there is some connections between this sentioception, the sense that the others are conscious, and the way we can perceive machines are conscious. Okay, so this is the plan of the talk. Okay, so this talk assumes some conceptions I have regarding infant consciousness. So there are two relevant questions about infant consciousness. When does phenomenal consciousness emerge in development? So even if you accept that infants are conscious, the questions about when consciousness actually emerges is a relevant one. Even when you have the intuition that infants are conscious, you might have a hard time to detect or to isolate a specific evidence that actually can tell you that they are conscious and what they are conscious of, okay? So there's consciousness emerge at birth or emerge after birth or emerge before birth. There is this big question. I will not try to answer these questions today. I have previous papers where I propose that consciousness might emerge at birth at least, and I have a recent piece where I make a case for what has been called in the literature the early onset view of consciousness, and the idea that maybe consciousness might emerge before birth, so in the womb, in late pregnancy, okay? And I suggest some markers of how we might detect whether infants are conscious or not. If there is a marker that we could use as a test for consciousness in infants. So for this talk, I'll just assume that consciousness emerges at a certain point, or maybe consciousness emerges at birth. And I will be much more interested in the type of phenomenology that they might have when they are conscious, okay? So I'm calling this project Phenomenologenesis. So it's the emergence of a qualitatively new form of subjective experience during ontogenetic development. And you can make a parallel with other types, other use of this expressions. I don't know, neurogenesis, when certain neurons emerges, or some other type of emergency in the related to other structures in the brain. Okay, but I'm interested in the emergence of phenomenal consciousness. Okay, the onset of phenomenal consciousness. But you can apply this to other cases, for instance, when self-consciousness emerges, or in a creature that maybe previously had sensory consciousness, when introspection emerged in a creature that previously had affective consciousness. And I think development and the emergence of certain cognitive capacities shape this phenomenal repertoire that we adults have when we achieve adult life, okay? Of course, some specific types of phenomenology will be associated to some very specific types of cognitive capacities. For instance, when we acquire language acquisition, there are some types of phenomenology that become possible that would not become possible before language acquisition. So for instance, just think about the way we might hear some sounds previously of language acquisition, and how we might hear some sounds after you have a language acquisition. So after a language acquisition, some sounds will become words and will immediately trigger some type of reflection or a reflective process in our minds. Okay, so different types of phenomenologenesis, affective phenomenology, perceptual phenomenology, cognitive phenomenology, imaginative phenomenology, agentive phenomenology, reflexive, noetic phenomenology of memory, moral phenomenology. And you can think about social phenomenology, other minds, how we perceive others. And this is my focus for today. I have another paper where I discuss what are the varieties of phenomenology that infants might have. For today, I will focus on the social aspect, understood as perceiving others, okay? So I was first triggered by this question I was invited to participate to give a talk at the Martina Niederrumelin's retirement conference. And she has a new book that will probably be out in the next year. And the book is about conscious individuals, and she has those two quotes that I thought was very intriguing and interesting. It seems obvious that from an early age, children understand the difference between conscious subjects and mere things. It's part of the content of our experience of others that we seem to be presented in each instance with someone. When observing a bird searching for food, you see the bird as a subject, as an individual to whom things appear in a particular way, as an active and conscious being. To see others as experiencing subject is deeply incorporated in the way we perceive the world around us. Perhaps we are born with that capacity. So this is my question. Are we born with that capacity? And if we are, when the capacity emerge, and what might be required what are the conditions for us to detect that this capacity is in place? So she continues, very small children and non-human animals may perhaps be unable to use the general concept of an experienced subject in their thought, and yet be capable of having perceptions incorporating that concept in the sense just defined, okay? The sense she defines in the book. When newborn, so it's not just infants, but very early stage, when newborn perceive a parent, they perhaps see the parent as an experienced subject in a phenomenally manifest manner. Okay, I'll try to see if we have evidence for this, and if you can develop some account that might explain this intuition that newborns might have, this capacity to see an experienced subject. Okay, I'm calling this sense for maybe I was trying to think about some type of words that could explain this. It's not just perceiving others, it's perceiving conscious subjects. I'm calling this sentioception, I don't know, perceiving sentience. Perception of another individual as having subjective experience, as conscious or sentience subject. And this goes beyond attributing goals or beliefs, okay? I don't think we need, I want to disambiguate since the beginning, attributing beliefs to others than perceiving others as having experiences, okay? So it involves what? It involves attributing phenomenal consciousness, what it's like, what it's like experience we have of ourselves to others, okay? Is distinct from fear of mind, second-person engagement, emotional contagion and empathy, and merely seeing an agent acting, okay? Although this might sometimes overlap, okay? We might, in an empathic reaction, we might sometimes have the sensoception experience, but I want to disambiguate since the beginning. If you can actually find this type of experience that is not captured by those other types, or those other four ways to think about our relationship with others, okay? Okay, what are the quick questions? When of course, when the sentioception emerges in infancy, if we can have some developmental benchmarks that can tell us what perceptual cues trigger it. Okay, so we have this sense, but what has to happen in the world for us actually to perceive consciousness in others? Is it innate? Is it learned? Is it co-constructed? How can we measure it without verbal reports? What kind of behavior indicators we can use? Does it require or not any conceptual abilities? Okay, I think those are key questions. I might not be able to reply to all of them, but have some, give you some hint of the general picture that I will favor in the end. Okay, I'll start with what I'm calling 3 levels of other mind attribution, and I'm leaving out in purpose what I'm calling this maybe level 0 of contingency detection. Maybe I think the central sections might involve more the contingency. And if you think that we start just identifying contingency, you might want to attribute before the agency detection, contingency detection, and it's okay for me, for my account. You can, if you think that there is this previous state, I'm happy for us to start with the agency detection. But what would be the 3 levels of other mind attribution? First, we start with agency detection. We attribute goals and intentions to others. Then we start with, I'm calling perceptual state of attribution, okay? What might involve seeing others as conscious and knowing others, seeing others and knowing others. And then we develop a phenomenal state of attribution where I can attribute not just seeing and knowing, but also feeling pain and surprise. Identify some specific emotions or specific mental states, internal mental states with quality, with phenomenology in others, okay? So I might be able to perceive an agent and see the agent before I'm capable to attribute some internal mental states, okay? Okay, so first level, agency detection. What might involve, you might need this self-propelled movement, okay, the movement that starts with the agent, and contingent motion, okay? If you don't want to build the contingency in the first, in a level 0, you can build the contingency in the agency detection, okay? What is relevant for this level? When we attribute agency, we could predict the action of the agent given their goals. Sometimes we don't know the trajectory, but we might be capable at least to predict some actions, okay? And I think this is kind of a foundation for the higher levels, for the levels that will come later. So what is the type of evidence you can have? Okay. So contingent interactions and self-propulsion probably start at the first 3 months of life. Newborns, they treat blobs that move congenially or change directions autonomously as a special, preferring them over inert motion. So start already disambiguating some blobs that actually don't move and the other ones that move. At 5 and 9 months, we have the goal-directed reaching. 5 months look longer when a human hand changes goal object rather than trajectory, implying that they encode the underlying goal. Okay. And they can disambiguate around the 9 and 12 months, mechanical from biological agencies. Okay, so they in a task where they have to interact with, for instance, robots, they are capable to disambiguate the biological agents from the mechanical agents. So by the end of the first year, infants still take a human hand to be more strongly goal-directed than a mechanical claw, indicating that cues to animate agency weight their inference, okay, the way they're attributing consciousness to others. Okay, the level 2 perception, okay, represents what others can and cannot see. So you're seeing an agent, but you're not just perceiving their movements and the intentions, but also you attributing some mental states, some perceptual mental states to the agent. And you anticipate what the agent can or cannot see, okay? This ability required for perspective taking and might be a precursor of belief reasoning. So what evidence we have? So at 6 months old, they can, when they perceive a difference between an agent that has the eyes open or the eye closed, they can disambiguate what type of perceptual states the agent might have. So 6 months olds fall on other gaze only when the person's eyes are open. If you move your head, but your head has the eyes closed, you don't attribute perceptual states. You're already capable to identify these distinctions. So if the eyes are closed or the head is turned, gaze falling drops sharply. So you're not actually using gaze falling. 7 and 12 months, there is this nice experiment with a blindfold, the blindfold tricks. So after a week wearing opaque versus a transparent blindfold, at 12 months old, they start treating only the transparent blindfolded experimenter as able to see. So it's a nice experiment. I have, I think, one picture more towards the end regarding this. So you can use a transparent blindfold or a non-transparent blindfold. And once the infant is habituated and understands that the transparent blindfold is actually the blindfold that can give you visual information of your surrounds, the 12-month-old starting anticipating this, and they just follow the gaze of the experimenter with the transparent blindfold. Okay. And also this might inform perspective taking and implicit false beliefs task around 5 months. okay? Okay, the third level is phenomenal states, attributing actual subjective experience, not just perceptual states, but actually having some phenomenology associated to this, okay? So attributing pain, attributing pleasure, or attribute other type of affective states, and attribute, I don't know, maybe a visual experience that triggers some discomfort, okay? Something associated with this, with the experience that has some qualitative state, okay? Okay, this is more controversial and hard to test. So it's hard to get some kind of evidence for this. So one potential evidence comes from empathy, early empathy and affective contagion, okay? Where you actually have a difference coded by pupils, the dilatation of pupils dilatations, when an infant hear another baby cry or see an adult fearful face, okay? The dilatation of the pupils predict that the infant will have some attitude to try to help, okay? A helping behavior related to identify some type of discomfort. 7 and 9 months, there are some type of neuroactivity that in areas linked to your own pain, okay, that might be mirror actually the state of others when you see others in the same kind of state. So this response go kind of beyond just a detect agent. You actually have to detect the quality of another state, okay? Sensitive to other surprises, so not just sensitive to their agency or the potential of their perceptual reactions, but actually identify surprise or surprise expressions in others, okay? And there is some study from neurosynchrony with caregivers that show some dyadic synchrony that might reveal some interactions that goes beyond just attribute perceptible agency stages, okay? So there is some kind of rhythm that the caregivers establish with the infants that might code what we can call shared experience. Okay, so those, of course, there are some challenges here, but those are potential avenues that we might try to find those the type of evidence that encodes the phenomenal conscious attributions to others, okay? We can integrate this in a developmental timeline, tell a developmental story of this evidence. So we might start at birth with neonatal imitation and animacy bias, or identification of some animate creatures. At 3 and 6 months, we have agency cues and also affective resonance through empathy and emotional contagion. At 6 and 9 months, you start tracking perceptual access, not just tracking the agents, but also track what the agents is actually seeing in the world. At 9 and 12 months, you might have this preliminary phenomenal sensitivity to others, like actually reacting to others' phenomenological states. And at 5 months, with the emergence of mind reading, at least the first stages of mind reading, you might have developing some concept of phenomenal consciousness in others. So this would be a more conceptual stage, okay? Yeah, so this is a kind of developmental story where I connect this evidence with what kind of behavior you might have. So in early states, you represent certain movers as agents, but probably you do not yet represent their inner states. Okay, you just represent an agent. By 6 and 90 months, you start having clear markers of perceptual state attribution. Okay, and by 10 and 15 months, you start monitoring another's perceptual and affective state. So then you have a kind of more robust evidence that this attribution to consciousness to other might be more robust. Okay. Of course, as we know with developmental data, we can always find some precursors that indicate that in early stage there is something else that might be connected or can tell a developmental story. But I think this is a kind of more reliable story for now. Okay, methodological challenges. One challenge is, phenomenal states are private, so infants must rely on behavior processes. Even if they're attributing phenomenal states to others, they have to rely on behavior. Okay. Another challenge, do infants actually attribute phenomenology or just representing their mental states? Okay. Another challenge is whether there is some projection from us, some adult bias interpretation, where we are seeing in infants some phenomena that actually would be the way we would perceive others, and whether the low-level explanations would be sufficient for telling us the whole story, and we don't need to add an extra component, the centroception idea, to the picture. Okay, so whether the low-level emotional contagion, for instance, would give us everything we need to explain attribution of phenomenology to others. Okay, I don't have answers for all this, but I'll try to just extract from these methodological challenges 2 skeptical views and try to reply to those 2 skeptical views. Although I know I still have some work to do to tell a better story about those methodological challenges, but I would like to put on the table that we can raise those challenges for the evidence. Okay, skeptical challenges. Number 1, are infants actually perceiving representation or agency rather than perceiving phenomenal consciousness? You might say, no, we actually never perceive phenomenal consciousness. We just perceive agency, and we represent agency, okay? So a skeptic can say there is no strong evidence. Everything you're saying about phenomenal consciousness, we could say about perceiving agency. So why not just say that infants perceive agency? So all experimental evidence is consistent with them merely attributing representational states to others with no commitments about phenomenology. I don't have a right answer for this challenge, but I have more a question. If this is true, what could be a strong evidence for centroception that would disambiguate centroception from attributing agency? Okay, so I think I always thought that it's very compelling when infants start using their own mental states or assessing their own mental states and assessing their feelings to attributing feelings to others. So this might be a way to go, okay? Whether this, the phenomenon, in the case of agency, you might say, okay, first I attribute agency to others, then I identify agency myself. Is this the same process regarding phenomenal consciousness, or phenomenal consciousness, I start with my feelings and then attribute feelings to others? It's a question. Second skeptical challenge, are infants perceiving phenomenal consciousness or just inferring phenomenal consciousness, just using mind reading abilities, as maybe phenomenal consciousness in the developmental story I'm telling is very close to a very primitive stage of mind reading abilities, okay? I think this might be can be understood as a verbal dispute. The sensoception have to involve perception of others' consciousness, or can it involve cognition, including inferential judgments? Okay. I understand sensoceptions broadly, so that perception might not be required. Cognitive judgments from me count as sensoception. Okay. Although I think we have both. In my account, we infer states, conscious states on others, and we perceive conscious states on others. But it's okay if you think that what we have is just inference of others' conscious states. I think this inference of conscious states would be also count as sensoception, okay, in my account. Okay, so now I'll move to dualism. If there is any connections between sensoception, this capacity of perceiving others as conscious or inferring consciousness in others, and our intuitive dualistic picture, okay? And then I will say something about assembling AI conscious, assembling conscious AI. Okay, intuitive dualism. There is a paper by Paul Bloom that claim in a nice way that our intuitive, our dualistic picture emerged very early in development. So intuitive dualism, the idea that minds are immaterial and bodies and distinct from bodies arise earlier than we thought. So from 5 months, infants start to already distinguish between agents and objects. So there is something that is animate and something that is inert. So they expect physical objects to obey continuity and contact laws. They treat agents and social partners obeying different principles. Okay, so one has this self-propelled movement, and the other might react affectively to their interactions. And around 4 and 12 years old, they can actually engage with the stories and tell us a more clear, in a more clear way, their idea, this intuitive dualistic idea. Okay, so they think that the mind persists beyond the body, and there is creatures that are mindless, or creatures or a body that is mindless, and there is an experience as subject. Okay. So if we are capable to make these distinctions, it's because you're seeing some objects in the world as not having experiential mind, and other objects in the world or agents having an experienced mind. So maybe we could make a distinction between perceiving agents and perceiving experiential agents. Okay. And one question is whether this intuitive dualism would suggest a response to the skeptical challenge. So if you have this intuitive dualistic picture that persists, even if when you become adult and start studying philosophy, you move to physicalism. It seems for a long time in your life you were a dualist. And for some of us, maybe our entire lives. But there is a period of our lives that there is some very strong dualistic picture that might be a response to the skeptical challenge. So you might perceive experiences subjects in a different way as we perceive subjects that can be an agent, but there is no rich phenomenological inner life. Okay. I'll skip this. This is another quote from Martina, where actually she connected those 2 points. Large part of this book are dedicated to explaining this general notion of an experienced subject, omnipresent in our theoretical thinking and universally shared by all human beings. It seems obvious that from an early age, children understand the difference between conscious subject and mere things. So for this picture, for Martina picture, I think for the intuitive dualistic picture, it's important not just to attribute cognition. You have to attribute perceptual states or agents. You have to attribute to the phenomenal concept. Okay, so the attribution of mental states to other has to have this quality, this phenomenological quality. Okay, so we can make a picture as a sensoception, as a perceptual root of dualism, as a precursor of dualism. So here's a hypothesis, very initial hypothesis. Consciousness is given as something, but not reducible to the body in the dualistic picture. Infants' perceptual experience of another is bifocal. They see a body and they see a mind. Okay. Sensoception would be this orange of this felt experience between the difference between a body and a mind. Okay, and maybe ground some kind of proto-dualistic phenomenology of our social perception. Okay, okay, so I have I have a description, an attempt to just compare these two theoretical accounts that might explain the difference between agent and experiential agent. And I don't have time to go in very details for explain those two accounts, because I want to say something about simile conscious AI. So I'll go very fast. So one idea is from Meltzloff. So for Meltzloff, in his like me mapping, okay, you start with an action representation and then connect perception and what you're seeing the world and your action. And from this, you have your first person experience. So you first act in the world, and then you have your first person experience. And after having your first person, your first conscious experience that underlying your mental states, you develop a capacity to understand others like you. Okay, this agent actually is acting like me, because these agents also have goals, intentions, and feelings. Okay, so then you understand other minds. So in the Meltzloff view, the perceiving agent, okay, you start with the perceived agent, and from the perceived agents, we map. So you're perceiving agents here, and then you have the experiential agent here, and then you attribute this to the other minds. In Peacock's view, actually, perception per se, get this slide that is better. Perception per se already gives you two different representation of others. Okay, you have the agent and you have the subject of experience. Okay, and you can have the perceived agents and the perceiving subjects of experience that can come apart. Okay, and he uses two experiments. One that I mentioned already, the blindfold experiment, to show how infants can start attributing their own experiences from their own experience with a transparent blindfold, attribute potential mental states to others. Okay? And he also used, though both experiments is actually from Meltzloff. He also discussed another experiment from Meltzloff, how infants treat robots in certain contexts, can treat robots as sentient beings, or can treat in the context that the robot actually is interacting with the infant. And once the robot stops interacting with the infant in a contingent way, the infant goes back to attribute just an agent without any type of mental states. Okay, so the robot study shows that our perceptions regarding a robot can actually be disambiguate between this the robot as subject of experience and the robot as an agent. Okay? And Peacock used those two examples to show that those two demonstratives, this is a subject or this a subject of experience and this is an agent, they can actually come apart. Okay, but they are actually both they're components of our perception of others and our interactions, our social interactions with others. Okay, so there is difference from Meltzoff accounts where the perceiving experiential agents is actually grounded in the first level where I perceive the agent. Okay, final, and I think I have just 2 minutes. I'll try to be very fast here. So I think there is an interesting discussion nowadays regarding whether we should build a conscious AI, AI capable of conscious experiences, and even if you disagree whether we can actually have AGI and a machine with conscious experiences, the question whether we will perceive consciousness in a machine is relevant, even if the machine don't have consciousness. If the machine has consciousness, it adds many ethical considerations and welfare and AI safety that I will not pursue in this talk. I will be just concerned with this idea of signaling conscious AI. So here is Mustafa Suleyman, the CEO of Microsoft, and he has a book that will come out soon discussing signaling conscious AI, and have some pieces and have discussing the dangers of signaling conscious AI, AI that will trigger us I will call sensoception. Okay, we see the AI as having conscious experiences. Of course, there are he is concerned with the ethical consequences of perceiving. I'm more concerned in this talk with actually if there is any application of this developmental story I told with human AI perception, interaction between humans and AI. Okay, so we can say, given if you accept everything I said, that humans are tuned to detect contingency, to detect agency, and to detect subjectivity or detect conscious minds in their environment. These capacities evolve probably for social interactions. There are many interesting accounts how probably having this sensoception was relevant to scaffold our social interactions with others. So when we encounter a similarly responsive system, so ChatGPT, Siri, robots, or whatever system you have in mind that actually triggers the our sensoception, our perceptor systems might automatically engage in the same way we engage with our real social partners. And this is one of the ethical worries, that perceptually triggers the same type of reactions we have. If this is true, you can say that anthropomorphism is not necessarily a cognitive error. It's a kind of a byproduct of our own perceptual architecture for intersubjectivity. We are shaped for intersubjectivity, and probably we shape ourselves with the robots intersubjectively. So this capacity might be developmentally grounded. Okay. But you can also discuss, okay, what we are perceiving. There is a contingent detection, or there is experiential detection. What is actually being perceived? Okay, so AI system. Why AI systems create this type of interaction with us? They produce rapid contingency response to our cues. They answer when we speak, they adjust their tone, and they follow our inputs, okay? And this seems to activate the same type of reactions that infants have to attract those social partners, okay? So temporal contingency, replying with a temporal connections with the input you give. This turn take a structure like a dialogue. I say something, it mimics a kind of a proto-conversation we have. And you can create some predictions of, and create expectations how the systems will behave, okay? So even this interaction with a syntactic creature feels as if the creature is alive. There's this illusion that the creature might be alive and might satisfy these minimal cues, okay? Okay, what about agency? So once contingency is established, once you are in this relationship that is mimicked this proto-conversation, okay, we spontaneously infer agency, okay? And then, okay, so we spontaneously perceive agency, whatever if you prefer a more cognitive account or not. So internal source causing those contingent behaviors, okay? So in AI, this might be related to the goal-directed language that signals some intentional control of what they want to say to us. Adaptive problem solving that might evoke just the pursuit of a goal, and visual embodiment, okay, that might amplify. If you have a robot with face, if you have voice, everyone, I don't know who had the chance to talk with an AI, but it triggers more intensively the sense than if you just read the text, okay? So you might think, okay, immediately you apply this machinery, this evolved machinery, and interpret them as an agent, and from there you go very close to consciousness, okay? So one question is how from the agency we go to consciousness. So you start seeing the agents not just an agent, but as an experiential agent. So one question about simile AI conscious is if you build a simile AI conscious AI, you might be very quickly moved from agents to consciousness, to experiential agent. So you're not anymore seeing an agent. If you have a system that can mimic the perceptual attunement of feeling and experiencing we have with others, we are very close to simile conscious AI, okay? So we will perceive not just an agent, we will perceive an experiential agent. So arguably, this is perceptual projection, not inferential reasoning, okay? You might start inferring agency and might soon start perceiving consciousness. So we don't infer that the system feels, we see as if it does, as a quasi-phenomenal perception that is triggered by this human-like expressivity and responsiveness. So we can also ask whether we'll be able to correct as we correct some perceptual illusions. Oh, I'm seeing that there is a perceptual illusion here, but cognitively correct the illusion. Okay, I'm done, and I'm having really 5 minutes more of my time. Conclusion: sensoception, perception of conscious others may emerge gradually. Attributing agency is distinct from attributing consciousness, but provides a scaffolding, evidence that will converge around 1 year. There remains a substantial skeptical challenge about sensoception in infants, the methodological ones I raised, how we can detect the evidence, we can isolate the evidence, but also the discussion between whether they are just representing or actually perceiving agents or perceiving consciousness. Understand the roots of sensoception in infant might help us to understand sensoception directed to AI system, as we have been also doing this in the case of animals. Okay, thank you.